Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Sociological Theories of Crime. We're up to week 7. This is a really different perspective to what you do with Sheena because that looks at specific social problems. So today we're going to look at more holistic or broad type problems and theories that might explain why a person becomes involved in crime. Totally different to psychological issues or psychological theories which look at the individual only. This is looking at the broader world. So in part 1 today, we're going to look at just a little bit of history, and first we're going to have a bit of a fun thing. So it's time for you to start thinking like a criminologist. So what are sociological theories of crime? Well, here's a little bit of a thought experiment. We've got 2 flower pots. Flower pot A's got great soil, great sunlight, great rain. Flower pot B has poor soil, poor sunlight and poor rain. We put the seed in. It really doesn't matter whether the seed's a good seed or a bad seed. What's going to happen with what the conditions are surrounding that seed in the pot? Well, obviously, if flower A has got all these good things surrounding it, we're going to get a bumper lot of flowers which look really pretty. Poor old flower B over here, without the good soil, the sunlight and the rain around them, then they're not going to flourish as well. You might get one little flower if you're lucky, but certainly not a big pot full. So how can we explain this? What does this teach us about sociological theories of crime? Well, here's another one. What about the quality of the seed? What will happen if you've got all those great things happening here, but poor seed? For flower pot B, you've got all those poor things happening, but you've got a really great seed. What do you think is going to happen? Well, this poor seed might still flourish and become something beyond expectations because it's got all these great things happening around it. This great seed over here, probably not going to flourish as much because it's got everything around it is against it and it's poor. So that's what happens in sociology theories. We talk about what's going on around it. But what if those conditions change? What if now that poor seed has got still great rain and great soil, but poor sunlight? And flower pot B that's got the great seed, still poor soil, poor rain, but now got great sunlight, what do you think might happen? Well, this poor seed is not going to flourish as well as it did with the great sunlight, so it's going to lessen back a little bit. The great seed over here, it might still have poor soil and poor rain, but just having that little bit of sunlight might mean that it's got a better chance of getting through the surface and flowering. So what does this teach us about interaction as theories of crime? We're talking here about theories that combine and work together for an outcome. So the learning objectives for today. Describe the key sociological perspectives, compare and contrast how these theories can help us prevent crime, how interaction as theories explanations differ from psychological or sociological theories, and we're going to apply these theories of crime to explain one or more forms of criminal behaviour. Before we can move on to doing all this though, we do need to do a little bit of history. So go back and look at the history of where all this started. And this all started right back in the 1800s with Cesare Lombroso. Now, there was research going on before Cesare came along, before Lombroso came along, but he was the first one that did any type of scientific study. So he was educated in medicine and was a doctor, and he was really interested in anatomy and physical traits. His book, The Criminal Man, was published in 1876. And it discussed how he believed that some people are born criminals and they can be distinguished from other people. Oh, I didn't do that. Because they had distinctive stigmata, and we'll talk about what stigmata is in a minute. He also talked about the fact that born criminals are atavists from an earlier phase of evolutionary development. And again, we'll talk about that shortly, about what is an atavist. Okay, so these are some of the photographs that he took of different faces. The one thing you will notice is that they are all men, and I will discuss that when we come to the feminist perspective. and these are their skulls that he was able to get after death. Okay, stigmata. The stigmata is all about their physical features. So, greater skull thickness, large jaws, relatively long arms, low and narrow forehead, large ears, absence of baldness, darker skin greater, visual acuity, diminished sensitivity to pain and absence of blushing, having an aquiline or otriolobal nose, it's just their nose shape, okay? Insensibility to pain, extremely acute sight, tattooing, excessive idleness and love of orgies. So these were said to be the physical features that he could attribute to if someone was going to become a criminal. So in other words, he could look at people and decide whether they were going to become criminal or not. If you have a look at this, high cheekbones, that takes me out, I'm gone. Absence of baldness, my husband's gone too. So, you know, you could find a lot of people that have never committed crime that would fit into some of these anatomical features. Atavists are said to be the biological throwback. So someone who's not evolved from tens of thousands of years ago. So they're driven to act as a normal ape or savage would. And this behaviour has now been deemed to be criminal in our civilised society. Evolutionary theory, which is covers this, is used quite often to describe rapists. They have just revisited that time from evolution and not moved forward and evolved. We as a human race have evolved. We are much taller and stronger than we were even 100 years ago. The average height of soldiers in World War I would have been about 5'8" to 5'10". Men now are, you know, often, many of them, 6 feet and above and much, much taller than that. Better nutrition, better air quality. We do have better air quality than what they did when they all lived in the industrial age with a lot of pollution. We actually have people now who are being born without an appendix because appendices or appendixes, whatever you want to call them, we don't need them. So they're born without them. So as a species, humans have evolved, but atavists have not evolved. They are biological throwbacks. Towards the end of his life, Lombroso did recognise other influences, so born criminals. He said these were the biological throwbacks. Insane criminals, he believed these to be idiots and imbeciles and those with disorders that predispose them to deviant behaviour such as dementia, epilepsy and alcoholism. And criminaloids were anyone else who committed any crime that didn't fit into the born or insane criminal category. So he said that these were the good people who committed acts in a jealous rage or who were surrounded by criminal influences later in life. Okay? As a conservative political argument, it can't be beat. Evil or stupid or poor or disenfranchised or degenerate, people are what they are as a result of their birth. Social institutions reflect nature. But this theory was all about blaming and studying the victim and did not at all look at their environment. And his research and theories did lead to the development of asylums for the criminally insane. And there were people back then that were criminally insane. So they actually started to treat them a lot better. The problem with Lombroso was that he was not objective. It was popular because it focused on individual failings, saying nothing of social inequality. It resonated with evolutionary thought in the 19th century and the idea that some societies and individuals were superior to others. So the theory was clear and simple. Distinguishing criminals from non-criminals could be objective, but it wasn't really objective. To control crime, you just simply had to identify the criminals. This was during a time when industrialisation was really rapid, and it was so rapid that society had not evolved sufficient mechanisms to regulate its transactions. Periodic cycles of overproduction followed by economic slowdown indicated that the relations between producers and consumers were ineffectively regulated. Strikes and labour violence indicated that the relations between workers and employers were unresolved. So the alienation of the individual worker and the sense that the division of labour was turning people into mere cogs in the wheel indicated that the relation of the individual to work was inadequately defined. And these ideas were expanded in his study of suicide. The other problem with Lombroso was that the area that he got all these photographs from was quite small. It was the northern part of Italy. So you can't really say with any confidence that he looked at different cultures, men from all over the world, but it is important because it was the first scientific research that was conducted. This is just a side point. So Dundalli was an Aboriginal warrior. He was executed in Brisbane in a public hanging, and after he was buried, his body was dug up and his head was cut off and sent to Europe. Now, all of these skulls, or most, I don't know, but you can view skulls from the Lombroso study in museums in Europe, and the belief is there that Dundalli's skull may be among those that he studied, and it's unknown where it is. So that's why Dundalli just becomes a little bit important in all of this. Okay, that's the end of part 1. So we're now going to move in part 2 to look at specific sociological theories of crime and how they relate to criminal acts.